Okay, so this part is we're going to continue a little bit philosophy of science, or um, we've talked about explanation in the last one. Today, my thesis is going to be that science could be viewed as an efficient game of mastermind. I don't know if you're familiar with the game of mastermind, but I'll tell you about it. So here's what the game looked like, and it came out and had a little burst of popularity among some people. So you get a game board and it came in this box, and this picture is kind of famous, and you have these pegs that you use. And the goal is to find a secret code that in this version is hidden here, and then this gets covered up. Four pegs, if there are six colors, well, for the German speakers, it came out under the name in German Superhirn, which for the English speakers, that means well, sort of mastermind or super brain or something. So here's how the basic game worked. If there were four positions and six colors, you could have any of six colors in each of four positions. So you have six times six times six times six, otherwise known as six to the fourth power, or 1296 possible hypotheses about what that person put as the secret code. If you have eight colors, which we'll see a version of it with variable number of positions, but maybe we'll play it with four positions and eight colors, you have eight times eight times eight times eight, or eight to the fourth, 4096 possible hypotheses. Each play of the game is an experiment that yields feedback related to the accuracy of your hypothesis. And for each play, you get one colored peg. It's usually black, but in the version we'll see online, you could get a red peg instead of a black one. For each color that's in the correct position, and you'll get a white peg for each color that's in the wrong position. And the results are published. Basically, you get a list of the experiments and the feedback. And based on what's been published, you design new experiments and try a new experiment, and you get feedback. And the goal is find the secret code. So you can do this by playing it online. Let's see what this link brings us to. Hopefully you see that. You see some other games, but notice Mastermind is a choice. You see that? Yep. Okay. So we click here and we get ads, and the game appears here. And the secret code eventually will appear here once we find it out. And we can select a color and put it in there. And so here's our first experiment, namely two reds and two greens in those two positions. And then we can push the check button, and we find that there's only one of these is right. So we know that there's a red or a green, but if it's red, it can't be here. It can't be here or here. And if it's green, it can't be here or here. So there's a lot of hypotheses left, right? So we know already one of the colors. All right, now we know that if it's blue, it's got to be in one of these positions, or if it's yellow, it's got to be in one of those positions. Try another experiment. Try these four colors. Two of those are right. So of those four colors, two of them right. There's six possibilities as to which two it is. One of them's in the right position, and one of them's in the wrong position. So what experiment do you want to do next? Anyway, you get the idea. You can do these experiments. You keep going until you figure it out. There are 4,000, in this version, there are 4,096 possible theories of what it could be. So we know it's one of these two colors, one of these two colors, but it's in the right position, and two of these four, one of which is in the right position and one of which is in the wrong position. You want to do another experiment?
Sure.
What do you want to try?
I think orange.
This one?
Yes. And then
Where do you want it? Here?
yes.
So you're going to think that was right. Okay, what else do you think was right?
Uh I think the black was right. So next to the orange on the edge.
Can't be both the black and the orange was right. Well, you think the black is a right color, but it has
yeah.
another position.
Yes.
All right, so let's try black. Where do you want it? Could be here or here.
The other spot.
Here?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Now, what do you think was right here?
Probably red and then gold. And
You want red,
yes.
and it should go where?
There. Yeah.
Here?
Yes.
And what else?
And then the brown gold-ish color.
This yellow?
No, the brown one.
We know one of these two is right. See that?
Oh, right. Yeah, then the yellow.
Maybe your yellow, it goes here.
Mm-hmm.
You meant this by brown. Oh, this over here. Yeah, it can't be. Well, let's see. From this cell, we know one of them was right, and one of them, yeah. So this, we don't have anything from here. We know two of them were right.
Mm-hmm.
We have a red from here. We have a yellow from here. And we put a black over there. Oh, and so you think it's black and orange are the two. Okay, so that's possible, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's check it. You think it's right?
Yes.
No. All right. Anyhow, you got the idea there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to take the time to work our way through this, but you can follow this link and play it.
Yes.
Right. And you'll enjoy playing this because it's kind of like science. It is a kind of science. All right. So let's go back. Here's another version of the game. It also tells the history of the game. This version isn't as, the display isn't as big. So it isn't as pretty of a display in my opinion, but there's a nice little history of the game there also. And here's an example of a game. So here's black, yellow, blue, and blue. These are revealed because the game is over. So the code was hidden up here. And this person tried these four to begin with, and you see that they got, because this is in the wrong position, they got this white peg. And because blue is in the right position, they got this red peg, but otherwise that's all they got. And then of these four colors, only one was right, but it's in the wrong position. Black was in the wrong position. It's the right one. And here's an experiment that's real nice and simple, right? Here's a nice, I'll call these critical tests. No feedback, so we know there's no red. We know there's no green. See that? Sometimes knowing what something isn't is very nice to know because you don't, the world isn't so complicated anymore. So based on that, this person did another experiment here and they got three right and all in the right positions. And then it took them a while to get the whole rest of it figured out. All right. So it took them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plays to get it right. Now with 6 colors, people can usually finish in 3 or 4 moves. So it's surprising how well they can do. So this is analogies to science right here. All right, we do experiments, we get results. Based on the results, you revise our theories and we do a new experiment, right? So sometimes the results rule out our theory. For example, there was an all red and we got nothing, and so we just had to reject all the theories that had red anywhere. And we record the experiments and the results are preserved. So that's like the publication of scientific reports. And our experiments reduce the space of possible theories that are compatible with the evidence. And we are trying to find out what is actually the case. And the hypotheses can be partitioned with respect to components. Are there any reds? Is there something that is either red or blue? Could there be a red in this position? All kind of hypotheses like that. So we can think about partitioning aspects of the hypotheses. Now, science isn't quite as nice as Mastermind. Here's a few differences. In Mastermind, the feedback is 100% accurate. And unfortunately, in science, the feedback may contain errors or biases. And if you repeat the same experiment or you make a small revision and do almost the same experiment, sometimes you get different results. And now in Mastermind, we can specify the space of hypotheses exactly. We know exactly what all the theories are. But in science, the set of theories under consideration or that are being contended here, that expands as people construct new theories. So new theories are being constructed that are sort of instances. Some of them are higher order theories, like there's a red somewhere, but a lot of times they're specific hypotheses, like red, black, white. They're like that. Now in Mastermind, we know when we're done, when we have the right answer. But in science, we're never really done because new theories are being invented. Okay. It's not letting me click the thing onto the next slide for some reason. I lost my cursor. There we go. Okay, so what we want is efficient Mastermind. In Mastermind, you try to find the code with the fewest experiments. And that's what we're trying to do, is construct the most elegant experiments we can. You could go through with brute force trying one theory after another. It would take a long time, wouldn't it? And if feedback isn't perfect, the results are fallible. It might be a mistake to try to build our theory on fallible results. Replication is needed in empirical research, despite the seeming loss of efficiency. Now, suppose we did what they do a lot in psychology, which is you test hypotheses. You test hypotheses one at a time, and each significance test says reject or retain. Well, with 1,296 hypotheses, we work our way through and we try a particular hypothesis. We get a little closer to each truth with each rejection, but that's be pretty slow, right? If you had to test, how about we test red, black, white, yellow, reject. Okay, we try another one, right? If all we get is reject or retain, instead of the feedback we're getting in Mastermind. The Mastermind feedback is very informative, right? Now think about it this way. If you were doing hypothesis testing, suppose half the time that a theory is true, that a theory is false, you fail to reject. In other words, the data don't significantly reject the hypothesis. And suppose 5% of the time we reject a true theory. That would really be slow progress. And so this is what I'm encouraging you to think about with Mastermind. Don't think about doing your science the way a lot of psychologists do their research, which is testing hypotheses, then rejecting if you get a significant result, because some of the time a significant result occurs by chance. And a lot of time, a non-significant result occurs by chance because you don't have enough power. So significance testing is really not, you need to get informative feedback that tells you what's right or wrong about your theory. In the mastermind, you get that informative feedback. Now let's think about doing experiments that would cut the space of hypotheses in half. A lot of times people think about this. A good experiment would be one that cuts your hypotheses in half. Well, in the basic game, there's 1,296 hypotheses. Suppose each experiment cut the space in half. Well, that means you start with 1296, you do an experiment, you're down to 648, then to 324, then to 162, then to 81, then to 41. Basically, by the time you're done, it's going to take 11 moves. But with a typical game, if you actually look at people playing Mastermind, the typical game ends after 4 or 5 moves, and a lot of times after 3. Rarely does it even go to 6. And the simplest little version of the game actually only had 6 spaces. It was a little pocket version with tiny little pegs that you could play on the train or while you're waiting for something somewhere. So Mastermind, people's ability to play with Mastermind is much more efficient than having the space. Now let's look at another idea that appears in psychology. You compute an index of fit, and you choose the model that fits the data better than another model. Well, we could assign numbers to each color. Maybe we're going to let green be 2 and blue be 3 and so on, and then calculate a correlation coefficient between the actual code and the experimental result. And then our publication, suppose the feedback was in the form of an index of fit, a correlation coefficient. Well, this index could be highly misleading because it depends on how you coded the colors, right? And what experiment you did. And furthermore, correlation coefficients can be higher for worse theories. And I wrote some papers called The Devil Rides Again, which were published back in the Psych Bulletin back in the 1970s. And those of you who don't know about all the mischief with correlation coefficients, I'll recommend you go back and read those papers. Now, in Mastermind, there's only one secret code. But in psychology, at least some versions of the theories people are pursuing, we allow that different people might have individual differences. They might differ in their parameters, or even more complicated, they might differ in the models or the rules that govern their behavior. That becomes a possibility. And so that's very tricky. That, in other words, if different people have different codes, that means when you finish, you might have a whole theory of one person, which isn't generalizable from that person to anybody else. So it's as if the different experiments might, if you did different experiments with different groups of people, there might be different secret codes there. So let's look at partitioning the hypotheses. In Mastermind, you might theorize, you might have a simple theory like there's at least a red, there's at least one red, or there's at least a blue, or there's at least a green. And then this area here might be that there's at least one red and at least one green. And this hypothesis in here might be there is a red and a blue and a green. And I haven't even brought in position yet, what's in what position. So you can characterize the theory by partitioning. And we can do the same in many fields, and I'll be talking more about that later in the workshop. But what is nice is to test properties that don't depend on the parameters. These are called critical properties in psychology. And they're like experiments that test all reds, a very simple theory that rules out a lot of special cases of the red theory. So if you have all reds and you get all nothing, you know that there's not a red in the first position or the second or the third or the fourth. There aren't any reds. In cumulative prospect theory, which has a special case of expected utility, implies a property known as stochastic dominance. So if you test that property for any personal parameters, any utility or value function, any probability weighting function, if people violate this property, and I'll tell more about it later, but I am mentioning it today because I'll refer back to the Mastermind lecture. If you find violations of this property, it doesn't matter what the parameters were or even what the functions were. If there's any CPT kind of theory, it has to satisfy that. So if you get violations, you can rule out a lot of theories in special cases. So what are critical tests? Those are theorems implied by one model that are violated by another. And that approach has tremendous advantages over indices of fit or comparisons of fit or absolute tests of fit. It's related to, but not exactly the same as axiom testing. In axiom testing, you develop a set of axioms from which a theory can be deduced. And it might be that different axioms could lead to the same theory. And so what we want are axioms that are not only sufficient for a representation, but also necessary. But at any rate, there are theorems. And if you can disprove the theorem, then you can disprove the theory. So we're going to use model fitting by one theory to predict where to find violations of theorems deduced from another model. So here's the summary. I contend that the study of alternative explanations, which remember psychology is the study of alternative explanations of behavior, we're doing experiments to test among the alternative. Each one satisfies the philosophical criteria that we talked about earlier. And now we have alternatives that make different implications for new experiments. The experiments are designed to inform us as to the space of possible theories that are compatible with the data. And from that, we revise our theories and design new experiments. And testing critical properties is a good way to do that, to give us information that allows us to cut the space of hypotheses more efficiently than simply testing them one at a time. They brought the models back together again. And here they are in 2003, 30 years after the original photos were taken. My guess is this lady might still be alive, but this guy looks a bit old. And I don't know if he's still alive today. That's a hypothesis we could check searching on the web. I haven't looked lately to see if we can find any more recent picture of him. There's a story about an old bull that a farmer had one bull and a lot of cows. And this game used to be known as bull and cows. So a farmer had a lot of cows and one bull, but the bull was getting kind of old and he wasn't getting as many calves as he used to. So he decided to get a new young bull. He let the young bull loose in the field, and the old bull began lowering his head and waving it from side to side and threatening and pulling on the ground. And an old cow came over to him and says, "You know, you're too old for this kind of stuff. What are you doing?" He says, "At least I can let him know I'm not a cow." All right. So there's value in negative information, especially when there's a limited number of alternatives, right? So hypothesis testing and ruling out the theories one at a time, that works if there's a limited number of possible hypotheses.